Hi everyone, Kyle here from Wide Awake PH. In today's episode, we'll be talking about the experimental lots of coffee we made with Tres Rosas Farm and Lucia Solis. So if you remember our previous episode on our experimental lots of coffee, you know that we've been working with Tres Rosas Farm to produce this new line of coffees for harvest 2022 to 2023. And finally, we have sample roasted these beans, and today we cup them and we get to share the results with you. So let's dive in and get into cupping. So that was the cupping ritual, and roasteries like us use cupping in order to assess the quality of the green beans coming so that we can make a purchase decision once we decide to commission a bigger lot of coffee or buy a bigger lot of coffee. And we also do this to assess the quality of the coffees we roast before shipping them out to you. So now we're done with our cupping, we're ready to taste these coffees. So these first 3 cups here are coffees that are essentially processed the exact same way. So these are yeast inoculated coffees, and then they were processed as a honey coffee. The difference is these 3 cups are using 3 distinct yeast strains. So here we're trying to see how those yeast strains interacted with the coffee produced by Tres Rosas Farm. And finally here we have somewhat of a wild card that the people behind Tres Rosas decided to do and commission. And this is an anaerobic natural coffee with yeast inoculated. So this will be interesting. I don't know what will happen because Lucia's protocol is to use depulped cherries, whereas this was inoculated as a whole cherry. So let's see. Okay, so just from the first taste, I have a very interesting impression to share with you. So they all have the same underlying characteristics that I know because I've been sourcing coffee from Tres Rosas Farm for the past 2 years. So they all have that farm's distinct signature profile, which is good. It means we can taste the terroir or the uniqueness of the coffees from there. In that all of them have this nice apple flavor, a nice brown sugary sweetness to them. But they're all very different expressions of that theme. So this first coffee, it has a very strong and heavy body. It's very textured and it has a hint of bitterness. So I'd say this would make for a great filter coffee. It would make for a great espresso, maybe even a good candidate for making our signature Kimulumbi blend. So this is awesome. These two cups right here taste very special. So whereas this first cup, we're using a more commercial yeast strain that's readily accessible by Tres Rosas Farm. These two were using imported wine yeast strains. And man, the cups are very different. So unlike this first cup, which has a very heavy body, very syrupy body, these have a very bright acidity and a very light tea-like body. But the difference is this third cup is reading more like, if you can imagine, like a Kenyan coffee with some strong black currant flavors. Whereas the second cup is presenting a little bit more like an Ethiopian coffee, where it's very bright, very tart, but the acidity is not as intense and the body is much lighter even compared to this one. And then finally, we have this anaerobic natural lot, which is presenting itself actually as a very clean natural coffee. So I get a slight hint of that anaerobic natural kind of fermenty flavor, but not so much because from what I understand, she only did, or the Tres Rosas Farm people only did a 3-day anaerobic fermentation with this. So we're not getting a strong, heavy fermenty flavor. It's a slight wine flavor with a lot of ripe fruit in it. Now that I've tasted these coffees again and again, I'm ready to share with you a more firm impression. So I sincerely believe that what we have in front of us here are some of the most delicious local coffees I've ever had in my life. Like, if you gave me these coffees 3 to 5 years ago, I don't think I'd believe you that they were from the Philippines and that a tiny new upstart farm produced them. They have a certain level of maturity and cup quality that is pretty difficult to find even in some internationally sourced beans. So let's talk about the opportunities and the drawbacks with commissioning these coffees. So on the one hand, the opportunities are great because then we have access to some really high quality lots of coffee. Like from a technical standpoint, because of the way Lucia Solis lets us do this processing. So the processing and the fermentation and the drying style basically allows us to roast these coffees with a finer level of precision. So what I mean is, once I'm roasting these coffees, what I notice is they are very predictable in the drum, allowing me to roast it light, medium, however I want. So actually, these two coffees here in front were roasted super light, like to a Nordic level. And usually you can't do that with lower tier, lower quality levels of coffee. But here, again, because of the way they were processed and dried, we can do it. So these coffees are tasting super bright, super tart, super clear, like a modern style of coffee. Tastes amazing. And of course, another opportunity is we can experiment further. As I've told you, these 3 cups here are honey processed coffees. So we can do the same kind of fermentation, same kind of yeast inoculation, but right after, process it as a washed coffee. And again, that will change the character, change the flavor expression of the coffee. So we can double the amount of flavors we have. And that's very exciting. But of course, we have lots of risks, of course, right? So doing these cute, small, under 5 kilo experimental lots of coffee, it's much easier because you have less coffees to work with. It's easier to monitor, it's easier to dry, easier to process, and so on. But the difficulty we have is porting this over to a higher level of production that is meaningful enough that we can roast a lot and share them with you, our customers. So that is the challenge we're facing. And honestly, if the processing or somewhere down the value chain something goes wrong, we're still going to be paying the farmer 100% of the purchase price because we commissioned the experiment. That's only fair. So that is the big risk here. But I think it's so worth taking the risk because honestly, how can we innovate? How can we serve you better tasting cups of coffee if we don't do this? We have to do this. And once we do, we will learn and we'll only keep getting better. So that's it for today's episode. I hope you guys enjoyed this behind the scenes look into how we make our coffees taste better. So please like and subscribe if you liked our content. See you next time.